By the end of this course, you will be able to learn how to use variants. Also, you would be able to create your custom variant properties and link them inside VS Code. Not only that, we would learn the best practices to translate our Figma properties into CSS classes and treat them as design tokens. If this is the first time you're seeing these videos, you can always go back to our channel and watch all the parts in a playlist. I've already created a playlist so you have an easier time following everything. If you're a total beginner and the topics that we discussed in this video seems a bit advanced, you can start watching this by going back to part 1. Let's just go ahead and expand our variants. Right now we see we only have two types of buttons. One which is the primary button, as you can see if I highlight it on the right hand side. The other one is a secondary button. We also managed to group our classes in the CSS side using comma. So this way our buttons are now exactly being developed properly, and the way we link them again is using the classes here, primary dash button and secondary dash button. Now what if we have exactly primary and secondary button in a small size, and now we need to create the medium size and a large size? So this way in Figma, the way we would do it is we would expand our variants and we create different sizes. And now you can think of this as design token. Usually in design token you would have certain values, for example padding and colors. These values will now be created in Figma as variant sets, and we would translate them as CSS classes on the VS Code side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight these, just bring them to the side. Now I need to create two variants. So if I click on my button, right now we see that we are setting the padding right side to 16 and also left side, top and bottom to 8. So we have our paddings. Let's say this is our normal size button. Now we need to create a large size. So what I would do is I would select my variant, click plus, and as soon as I click plus, now Figma tells me that you added the variant. Now you need to give it the value. However, I don't want this to be the value for my variant because I really don't want to change the color of it. I want this to be exactly the same primary. So let me just expand this a bit further. I want this to be exactly the same as primary, only just a bit bigger. And this is where we would use multi-dimensional variants. Basically what it means is if we have the same variant that has similar properties and is only just a bit different, we would use another variant property. And all we have to do is basically click on the variant master. Here you see on the right hand side we only have one property called CSS class. What we can do is we can just, for example, click on that and just only change this to color, or we can change this to theme, anything that makes sense to you. So now we know that we are using basically the theme, and we are setting the values to primary dash button, secondary dash button, and here we see that this one is being generated. You can use this tiny icon here to select that, and this is the new variant that we created, and we don't want to have that as CSS class 3. We want to exactly have that as this one. So here I would just click and copy that, come to my second, and then paste that. And then also once I paste that, I would also go ahead here and increase the padding size. So we have the padding size of 16. So all I have to do is just make it a bit larger. So let's just go ahead with 24 and 18. Sorry, I meant 16. So we have 16 top and bottom, 24 left and right. And you see that is my second variant. So basically the second variant is exactly the first one. And if I click on the master variant, you see that Figma tells me that you have some variants that are similar in terms of property values. So this is going to be conflicting. So if I click here, I would still get the warning. In order for me to solve this, all I have to do is come to my Figma variant button and just create another variant set. Right now I have named my first variant set as theme. All I have to do is create another property, and as soon as I hover over the property, you see the plus button appears. If you don't hover over that, you see the plus button doesn't appear. As soon as you hover over the property, you see the plus button. So I would click the plus, and now I have this drop down. So I have the ability to create another variant, instant swap, boolean, and different type of properties. So what I care about at this moment is create a variant property. So I would click that, and now I would call this padding, or you can call this size. So let's just go ahead and call this size, and the default value would be basically small. So we have a small button. Let's just go ahead and have this as small, create that, and now I have to assign all these buttons one by one, which means let me just expand this. Also, let me click on this one and create another one by clicking plus. So now we have 3 variants, and the other one I would just make it basically larger. So here I would just go ahead with 24, and also let's just go ahead with 32. Let's say that these are your buttons that are gradually growing in size. Also, let me just click plus 2 times. So this way I'm also creating my secondary button with different sizes. So this one, I set it to 24 and 16. So let's just go ahead here and then set this to 24 and 16. There we go. So we have the same properties in terms of auto layout. Here we have 32 and 24. So I would just go ahead and change this to 32 and 24. There we go. So now I have exactly these. So let me just go ahead and try to zoom in, bring these here, and all I need to do is assign them one by one. So the way it works is you would assign them vertically and also horizontally. So here we have all these 3 buttons. So all I need to do is select them, and then as you can see, they are assigned correctly on the theme. They're all assigned to primary dash button, which is good. I also need to highlight all my secondary one and just check the theme is correctly assigned to secondary dash button. Since these ones are correctly assigned, now I need to basically update the size property. So here I would just highlight my 2 large buttons, and now we see that they're set to small. So all I have to do is come and then change this to large, press return on my keyboard, highlight these 2 and go to the size again, and then set these to medium, and then finally highlight the last 2 and set these to small. In order for us to also be consistent with CSS, we want to also rename them with all lowercase, or maybe the shorthand version. So here, instead of small, I can just have this as SM, and then instead of medium, I can have it as MD, which is short, and then also large, I can just have this as LG. There we go. I can now basically try to test it out. Here, if I click on one of my buttons, this is set to primary and the size is small. So I have now the ability to switch between large, also have the ability to switch between secondary and primary. The other thing you want to do is, since I'm clicking on my button, it would be nice if I can also update my text here. So here, instead of me double clicking to update my text, it would be nice if I just single click and update my text within my property panel. This is fairly simple. I would just need to go back to my button, create another property. Here we have properties, and as soon as I click that, now you should guess that I need to create a text property. You can call this anything you want. I would just call this label, because this is going to be the label for my button. And then for the default value, I would just call this sign up. And once I'm happy, I would click create. Now Figma gives me this tiny error, which means that you already created your text property. Now you need to link it. So the way you would link it is, since these are all the same text sizes, all you have to do is click on one of them and do a multi-select. And Figma has this built-in ability. You see that tiny icon to the right, which is multi-edit variant. So if I click that, you see it automatically selects all the same instances for me. And on the right hand side here, you see we have 6 selected. If you don't see this option, which is okay, you can basically click that, disable it. There is another way I can show you to select all the same elements. First thing first, you have to select the parent one. Here you see on the left hand side, we're selecting the parent, and you have to use return on your keyboard. I'm adding the shortcuts here. So if I press return on my keyboard, here you see I've added return. Now I have selected everything on my variant. All I have to do is press return one more time on my keyboard. You see I've pressed return. Now I have selected all the text elements. So there's 2 ways for you to select them. If you also want to go one level up, you can hold shift and return. Here by holding shift and return, I'm going one level up. By pressing return, actually selecting all the text elements instead of going with multi-selection. So since I selected everything, all I have to do is go to the property, which is the typography one. And as you can see, there is this tiny icon, which is apply text property. Since I already created it, I just need to click on that and link it to label. And as soon as I link it to the label, you see this value has changed. It's actually being highlighted as purple, which means I've already linked all of these to my text property. So if I click outside and collapse everything on my layer panel, now if I click on my sign up button, here you see I have the ability to switch between small, secondary, and then go ahead and just add the value, sign up at the moment. As soon as I type something and I click outside, you see my button is now updated. Right now you see I have now the ability to update my text, my size, and my theme all within my property panel. You can also think of this as your component panel or as your variant panel. Also, what you notice is when I click on the small, it is not being organized, so it's set to SM, LG, and MD. It would be nice to reorganize it. So you can always navigate back to your master component by clicking on this tiny icon here. So by clicking on that, I would be navigated to my master component. And then also here, it tells me that you are using a variant. So you can again click on that tiny icon as well. And then by doing that, I'm actually navigated back to my master. And now as you can see, my panel on the variant side has changed. This is very useful if you're not using your components in the same file. For this purpose, I can simply click on my master one, but sometimes you might have multiple pages and you don't know where your component is. So that is one way for you to find them. So as soon as we find our master variants, all we have to do is basically go on the property that we selected, click on the setting or edit properties icon. And as soon as we do that, you see we have these values here. And as I hover over them, Figma selects them for me on the top. Here you see on the top side, as soon as I hover over each of them, Figma selects them for me. Even on the layer side, it highlights them. And it is very, very subtle. So you have to just, take a look at this tiny icon again on the left hand side. If you don't hover over it, it's not going to show. So you just have to hover over it, click and drag, and then just place this to the top. So now you organize your values from small to large. So I can close that. Same thing, if you do decide to have your themes and size in a different order, you just have to highlight that tiny 3 like hamburger icon, and by only hovering over that side you would be able to see it. Otherwise you're not able to see that. So you can also click and drag and basically reorder your properties. So now I'm done, and now I can again do a final test. So I have size, theme, and label. I can switch between primary and secondary. I can also switch between medium, large, which is really good. Now it's time for me to import this into CSS. So again, as a quick recap, we have something called the size, and then we set it to small. So we want to create like a design token / CSS class to be able to use that small padding size. Again, our small padding size is set to 16 and 8. So all I have to do is create a class called SM. So right now, as we can see, these are all small buttons, and this is the padding 8 and 16 that is applied to both of them. Now I need to do is create another class called small, and then just cut that padding and then apply it here and then save it. And what you notice is as soon as I do that, all my buttons lose their padding. But you don't need to worry, because we're using CSS classes, we can actually combine them. So we have again CSS naming convention. If you do decide to use CSS classes, you should follow a naming convention. And the way we usually name our classes is always with dash if it's 2 words, or an underscore. For example, if we have a class called big text, we would just rename it to big dash text. You can also rename your classes big on also capital T and then text. If you don't decide to use dashes, it's totally up to you how you want to rename your CSS classes. You can, however, rename your CSS classes starting with number, or have a colon, or have a space. If you decide to have a space, this is valid, which we are going to use, and that allows us to combine CSS classes. So if we just add a text class to the first paragraph, we're just applying the color of red. If we add the big class, which is font size of 20 pixels, to our third paragraph, we're only applying font size of 20 pixels. If we want to apply the text class and the big class to one paragraph, all we need to do is add a space. So if I do big space text, that doesn't mean the class is big text. That means we have a class called big, apply the styles. We have another class called text, apply the styles as well. The reason I say don't use a space, it's only because if you decide to use one single class. Spaces are valid in CSS classes. They will be treated as a separate class. And this is what we exactly going to do. If you decide to have one single class, make sure to add no spaces in between. However, if you add multiple classes to your paragraph, which we're going to do right now, we will add a space, and it's totally valid. So right now, in order for us to fix the sign up, cancel, buy buttons, all we have to do is, since we created that small class, we have a primary button and secondary button class, all I need to do is go ahead and add this class to every single HTML element and add a space. So again, there's another shortcut for you to do, which is find next match. What you can do is highlight the class until the quotation mark, and as you can see, once you do that, it would highlight the next finding match. And all I have to do is hold Command Shift and A multiple times to select the next match. And then once you add your cursor in these 4 places, all you have to do is just use arrow on your keyboard to basically navigate to the first one, and then add the keyword SM with a space. And as soon as I add that, you see SM space, and then we have our secondary classes. The padding is going to be applied to all of them. So here I would just save this, and now you see we are back to the normal results. Now the big difference is we can reuse this SM class, which is small, and we're actually using it to our primary and secondary button. Not only that, we are going to copy this 2 times, change this to MD and change this to LG, navigate back to Figma, click here, and then here we see the size is set to MD, and now our padding is 24 and 16. So all we need to do is fix that on the MD, 24 pixels on left and right, 16 pixels on top and bottom. We navigate back to Figma, and now we have the size LG. Here we have 24 pixels top and bottom, 32 pixels left and right. So for our LG one, we would just do 32 pixels top and bottom, 24 pixels left and right, and then we would save this. Since we have all these 3 classes created, again, you can think of them as design tokens. Now we can reuse them. So all I have to do is change one of the classes here. Instead of having small, I can simply change this to MD, which is medium. Again, medium space primary button, and then the last one, LG primary button. And then if I go ahead and save that, right now you see we have our sign up, which is a small. We have our buy, which is a bit big, and then finally we have our cancel, which is a bit larger. What you notice is the cancel looks like a square button. This is not what we had. I think if I go back to Figma, I made a mistake. So 32 pixels is applied to left and right. So by accident, I applied 32 pixels to top and bottom. So all I have to do is just cut that, place that, add the second value, and then save this. And by doing that, now I basically fixed my cancel button size. And guess what? You could exactly use the same utility classes for your secondary button. So all I have to do is basically duplicate that. Again, I have combined my duplicate to Command D. Make sure to watch the videos in the beginning, which I went over the shortcuts in VS Code. If you don't know, you can always bring the shortcut panel, search for the keyboard shortcut, or search for the action called duplicate. Here you see we have the duplicate selection. Also, the other one that I used was find. Here you see add selection to the next find, Command Shift and A. Again, this is how I binded it. There is another one which is called add cursor. Here you see it is actually binded to Option, Command and up, and that allows us to basically add our cursor. So here if I click on my primary, I can hold Command Shift and Alt and add my cursor like that, and then I have the ability to add multiple cursors in my HTML element. And as soon as I save that, I have cancel, which is being repeated 4 times. All I have to do is just change the classes to MD and LG, and also delete the last cancel button. Also, to be consistent, I can just copy that. There we go. Save that. And now I have cancel being repeated in 3 different sizes, sign up being repeated in 3 different sizes. If you want to decide to move sign up next to here, all you have to do is basically cut that sign up line and place it under the cancels. And the shortcut for it is move. So here, if you search for move line down, here we have option and the arrow down. So I would just basically click at the last line of the sign up, hold option on my keyboard, and then press the down arrow multiple times, and I would just bring the sign up down. As soon as I save that, here I have 3 sign up buttons. Let me just zoom in, linked to small, medium, and large. In terms of the CSS utility padding sizes, they're all set to primary dash button. Same thing, I have small, medium, and large. Link to secondary button, and as you can see, there is a space between them, which means apply both of these to one single element. As you can see, this is our final result, which allowed us to recreate exactly what we had on the Figma side. And then on the Figma side, if I click on any of my buttons, here on my drop down, I have small, medium, and large. For my size property, and then also for my theme, I have secondary and primary button. And as you can see, we have the text property. We don't have that capability in HTML. However, we do have this capability if we decide to use advanced JavaScript functionality. That way, we also have the ability to rename our component the same way we want. But for now, we're not going to explore that option because that is going to be super advanced. But for now, if you decide to use purely HTML CSS, you don't have that ability to rename your HTML elements to whatever you want. And also, you don't have the ability to add a text property to your HTML.